The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Do you regret saying that President Biden had a mental acuity? He had a sharpness to him. You said that up until July of last year.
I said what I believe to be true.
And you think he was as sharp as you?
I said I had not seen decline. And I hadn't at that point.
You did not see any decline from 2024 Joe Biden to 2021 Joe Biden?
Not when I said that. You know, the thing is, he was sharp. He was on his feet. I saw him. Live event. I had meetings with him a couple of times.
Senator, on his feet is not praise. He can speak in sentences is not praise.
Right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Look, the question is, what are we going to do now?
Okay.
There you go. If the Democrat Party is not dead, it's definitely on life support. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream of this program at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel, rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. The email address, if you'd like to submit some feedback, td@thetrumpet.com. So lots to get to on today's show. As I mentioned yesterday, we're going to talk later on about just the pace of prophetic events, how that there's no let up, as I said yesterday at the top of the show, whether it's events in the world like the Pope dying and how that we're going to have another Pope in about 2-3 weeks. And then all of the developments, really, you go back to October 7, that happened on the last great day, the last festival of God's annual plan or God's annual festivals. Then you have the return of Jeroboam just last November. And then all of this just two issues ago. I mentioned the latest trumpet on yesterday's show. This is the one from April, Up in Arms. Up in Arms, Europe reacts to the new Trump era. And then now you've got a new pope, and that's discussed right here. It's a new era, as my father says in this issue. And it calls for a new pope, and that's what we're getting. And then you look at all that's happening in God's work. I mean, it's intense. The pace, it's hard to keep up with. It makes your head spin. And it's very, very exciting as well. We're seeing so many prophecies being fulfilled. The world's in realignment. It's a new world order taking shape. And you see it. You see it every day. There's an election. One of our news gatherers said there's an election in New Zealand this week. Canada's is next week. You've got a new pope coming on the scene. You've got a new world order. You've got Germany militarizing itself, building a military machine. These are some pretty dramatic developments. And then, I mean, as part of it all, the return of Jeroboam anyway, you've got the silencing of the dear leader. And really the Democrat Party as they continue to defend Kilmar. I mean, there's 4 more congressional representatives that went to El Salvador just yesterday. And they couldn't even get their paperwork processed to be able to see Kilmar. So they're down there for the photo op. I mean, the heroes that these people choose, you know, the thugs, the criminals. And then they create all these false narratives. Over the weekend, by the way, I didn't have time to cover this yesterday with the breaking news, the Pope dying. But over the weekend, there was supposed to be millions and millions of people taking to the streets in opposition to Donald Trump. It turned out to be a few thousand. The Democrat Party is dead. This is from the BBC. Thousands took to the streets across the U.S. Saturday to protest over recent actions by President Trump, known as 50501, for 50 protests, 50 states, one movement. Did you hear about this? Probably not. Probably not. It was kind of a dud. It says the demonstrations were intended to coincide with the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolutionary War. It's a revolution. We're facing Orange Hitler. The Nazis have taken over. And the protests have begun, except that no one shows up. Listen to this from Jesse Waters last night, clip 2.
Democrats let foreign gangs invade America, and now they're whining that Trump's deporting them too fast. And the media says anyone who supports deporting illegals is a Nazi.
What did Hitler do in the Holocaust? He took people from Germany to other countries.
Yeah.
Where there was no German law. There was not even a pretense of German law. They took them to Poland or, Hungary or whatever, and they killed them.
And so when you see what's happening right now with this El Salvadoran gulag, I mean, this CICOT gulag, he's basically taking a page out of that playbook, you think?
There you go. No wonder both Chris Matthews, I think that's Jim Acosta, they're now on some obscure podcast that nobody watches. The Democrat Party is dead. And they don't even look so good right there. So I think Chris Matthews might be making a comeback, trying to anyway. But these people, I mean, the cycle of derangement. There's a headline at Politico today. Where is it? Al Gore compares Trump administration to Nazi Germany. This is what passes for journalism today. You've got some political activist or hack that says Nazi Germany as if that's some kind of a new talking point, a hot new take. And then there's some journalist at Politico saying, hey, Al Gore. Al Gore? Yeah. He's comparing America to Nazi Germany. And so the so-called journalist at Politico, he takes it and runs with it. Another fresh, hot take on Donald Trump. Just as an aside here, we've had some of our performers for Celtic Throne. We've got Celtic Throne 2. I think May 4th is when it plays at Armstrong Auditorium. You can go to CelticThrone.com to get all the details that you need for the international tour that's happening this summer. We're going to hit a few spots here in the States before heading to Israel, and then the UK. That's all coming in June. In any event, my kids and others have been on these interviews. They had one this morning with the BBC, and they've had some with some local channels here in Oklahoma City, and we're very thankful for the publicity. And 2 or 3 minutes on TV is better than nothing. But when you listen, I turned it on this morning and I saw some of the banter back and forth between the hosts and some of the stories that were totally uninteresting, just not, and then the chit chat. You see this on or hear it anyway, on radio. The few times I'll hear the radio during the day, basically when driving across campus. And anytime you've got 2 or 3 people talking to each other, it makes you want to pull your hair out. It's so shallow. It's so trivial. And generally, it's not that funny when they are all cackling like it's hilarious. But my point is, you flip even local channels. I mean, you've got here in Oklahoma City, you've got Channel 4, you've got 4.2, 4.3. I mean, you've got probably dozens and dozens of channels, so much content, so much programming. And there's like less than 0.1% of it that's even worth watching. If you had an hour, we take an hour on this program, and I was thinking as I was getting ready to see the interview this morning, boy, if we had an hour over the air that reached all of Oklahoma City, that would be awesome. To give them God's truth and to show them the Trumpet magazine and what Herbert Armstrong has been prophesying for decades before he died in 1986, and how the PCG is just continuing right on in that same tradition. I mean, that's important content. But instead, I mean, what passes for even news today? And again, it's a little different with local news. I mean, there's a lot of local stories, which are not very interesting, as I say. But even I flipped it over to Channel 4, and you got I never see whatever that is, Good Morning America or whatever's on there, from 7 to 9-ish. And it's just fluff. All these glowing pieces about Francis. Oh, he was so righteous. He was like Jesus. He was woke. He was inviting in homosexuals. We need another pope like him. This world is in darkness. The truth has been cast to the ground. So Al Gore comes along and says, yeah, it's Nazi Germany in America. And Politico is there to give it the platform that Politico thinks it deserves. Salon, Trump's open defiance of law leaves no room for Republican redemption. It's gone. The Republican Party is dead, so says Salon. The Atlantic, America's mad king. The president has grown more impulsive, more vindictive, and more anarchic. So for years, these same people, they swooned. They swooned before the dear leader. Now they're swooning before Kilmar. It's unbelievable. Yeah, they're going to get a photo op with Kilmar. And then the senator comes back and he makes all the rounds on Sunday, the Sunday shows, just the other day. His 15 minutes of fame with the activists, the political hacks in the media. And they're happy to put him right. And then, in her defense, I forget who it was, but one of them asked the senator on Sunday, well, who pays for this trip? Well, I mean, the taxpayers. So Americans are funding the junkets for these senators and now 4 more congressmen to go to El Salvador to meet with Kilmar, an El Salvadorian citizen. They want him back. They've got to get him due process. Due process for an illegal immigrant. In the morning brief, Joel Hilliker says 4 more Democrat representatives traveled to El Salvador yesterday to push for the release of Kilmar Garcia, who was deported by the Trump administration. The White House says Garcia is an MS-13 gang member. And you notice the media has gone quiet on that particular point because they know they don't have the truth. The so-called Maryland man. The Maryland man was MS-13. Okay, so there you go. El Salvador's president has refused to release him. It's not a good look for the Democrat Party, which is already hemorrhaging public support, spending taxpayer money on these trips abroad to demand greater legal representation and due process for an illegal immigrant? Seriously? And they wonder why they're dying? I mean, there's what's her name? Elizabeth Warren in the cold open there. She said, well, at the time, you see, I really believe that Joe Biden was as sharp as a tack. And then the interviewer, to his credit, never heard of the guy, never seen him. Are you saying he's sharper than you? I mean, the comedy writes itself. Are you saying that because he was able to get on his feet, he was never better? That exposes all their lies. The derangement. And then you look at some of these headlines. Al Gore, coming back from the dead politically to say this is Nazi Germany. And then Politico, there they are. Oh, yeah, sure, we'll trumpet that out there. We'll make sure it gets a larger audience. Listen to this this is a representative in the House, clip 11.
Well, that's what people need to remember, is that this can happen to any of us. Every American needs to know, as you watch this on TV, that you could be next. This administration has no red lines. I don't know what their red lines are. And so this could happen to you next. They could be coming for you next. This administration will not stop.
So they're coming for us next. We're all Kilmar. We're all going to be in El Salvador before this is over. This is a U.S. representative in the House. Listen to this one. This is clip 12.
I'm not afraid to speak up. I think that right now we have to worry about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press. You all are under attack, and due process every single day. And I will not be silenced.
There's Kilmore again. What about all the victims? I mean, this point has been made in conservative media, as it should be. Where were these people when victims were murdered or raped? Instead, they're going to the perpetrator. They're going to the wife beater. They're going to the MS-13 gang member. And they're getting pictures, cameras. Cameras are going with them. Meanwhile, the border's been effectively shut. It's now secure, as Trump said it would be. The Wall Street Journal, illegal border crossings declined significantly in the final year of the Biden administration from a period of record highs that at one point saw 250,000 Border Patrol arrests in a single month. That number dropped to around 48,000 in December. You see, Trump was coming in. The last full month of former President Biden's term, and to just over 7,000 in March. Though he was happy with progress on the border, Holman said deportation efforts needed to be intensified. And you've probably seen, yes, the Supreme Court, under the cover of darkness over the weekend, they come out and say, basically, Trump can't deport all these people. They had nothing to say. When I think Obama deported 3 million. I forget how many George W. Bush deported. No injunctions, no court orders, no court trying to block any of those deportations. It's just Trump. I mean, that tells you what you need to know about the derangement, about the just the satanic influence on this world, the pace of prophetic events. The devil is just stirring up the spirit in man, bombarding it with all of his impulses of selfishness, greed, competition, strife. Good is not winning over evil. Never mind what the late Pope Francis said on Sunday. It's evil that's winning. It's evil that permeates our society. It's evil that the Apostle Paul used to describe this world in Galatians 1. And that was 2,000 years ago. So the Supreme Court comes out with its ruling. I think this was Saturday morning, something like 1 a.m. And reading about this story, it's mind-boggling. Says, this is from Sundance, 1 a.m. on Saturday, the Supreme Court of the USA issued an injunction blocking President Trump from deporting illegal aliens identified under the Alien Enemies Act. It was or is a bizarre order, considering the lower court had not even ruled on the matter. Worse yet, the Supreme Court created an imaginary class of aliens. So here comes John Roberts rushing to the defense of Kilmore. Any illegal alien who happens to also be a gang member or illegal alien who would smartly now claim to be a gang member is ultimately the beneficiary of a Supreme Court order blocking their removal or deportation. And you got all these conservatives now telling or urging Trump to just say, forget what the Supreme Court, just disregard these court activists, these political hacks in black robes. How much longer does the United States have? I mean, the stability of the nation. Everywhere that you look, the foundation's cracking. It's not going to hold forever. Who in their right mind could look at all this and say, yeah, I think we've got a few more centuries ahead of us? $37 trillion in debt. Gold is now up over $3,500 an ounce. So, I mean, inflation has slowed, but there's problems. There's problems. Britt Hume was saying on Fox News that, in history, tariff wars, they never turn out good for either side. You talk about the pace. Judge Alito, in his dissent, He says literally in the middle of the night, the court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule. Here's the Supreme Court rushing to action when it wasn't even up at the Supreme Court level yet. Without hearing from the opposing party, within 8 hours of receiving the application, they just basically took what the ACLU said and then made a ruling. Here again, rebuking Trump. John Roberts loves to do that. He loves Kilmar. And they love him at MSNBC. They love him in Congress, if you're on the Democrat side of the aisle. It's no problem to create false narratives, to lie. Sundance says the Trump administration has already filed a response hitting on several of the key legal contradictions that are outlined by Alito in his dissent. The bottom line appears to be the ACLU ran to the Supreme Court less than an hour after filing a responsive motion with the Court of Jurisdiction solely on the false premise that some illegal alien member within the removal order process of deportation might be removed. And the Supreme Court bought the argument. Yeah, right on board with it. Barrett, Roberts, Gorsuch, all of them siding with the radicals on the bench. Listen to Jonathan. You had some commentators on Fox over the last couple of days saying, if you give 20 million illegals due process, whatever that means, they are getting due process in the sense that you didn't belong here. You got in here illegally, you're going back. But they want each of these individual cases to play out in court. Can you imagine? I think one of the Fox hosts said it would take 200 years. Listen to Jonathan Turley talking about Kilmar, clip 5.
He has had due process in the sense that he had an earlier hearing that found evidence that he was an MS-13 member that was based on a confidential source and other information presented by the government. It went on appeal. That ruling was upheld, but he was allowed to stay in the country due to the threats that he said were coming from an opposing gang and under a special rule that may no longer be applicable. So there was a process. Now, that doesn't mean that the administration should have brought him back. But if he's brought back, I don't see any basis in which he could stay here for very long. I think the administration has very good cause to go back and to really show that the original order is based on conditions that no longer exist.
Yeah, come back and 24 hours later, he's deported again.
That's Jonathan Turley on Laura Ingram's show. Due process. They're not defending him as a Maryland man anymore. Now it's just about due process. And to have a senator and 4 congressmen and women go down there to visit him on the taxpayer dime. There's a lot of Americans that are just furious at the way these Democrats are fighting for illegal aliens, other nations. Everyone except for America or Americans. Just the News says President Donald Trump on Monday slammed the U.S. court system, including the Supreme Court, over their response to his efforts to deport illegal migrants, stating that it's not possible to try every person who is in the U.S. illegally. How could you put them all through the court system without just destroying the courts, without just bogging it down into an endless line of foreigners? The Supreme Court over the weekend temporarily blocked Trump's latest round of deportations. That has come under scrutiny, it says, after he removed hundreds of illegal migrants he accused of being gang members without due process. The president defended his actions on Truth Social, claiming it would take 200 years to try every illegal migrant. But I guess that's what Amy Coney Barrett wants. 2 centuries. Handcuff Donald Trump. But if the dear leader does it, I mean, you worship him. You worship him. If the fake president's in there, you pretend he's as sharp as a tack. You heard Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, at the time, I believed that. Well, what about now? They know. They know how to dance around the truth and not really put themselves in a corner. Let's leave yourself an out. Parse the language just so that you've always got an excuse. Listen to Donald Trump. I think this was in his Oval Office meeting with Georgia Maloney the other day, clip 15.
We were inundated by millions of people, many millions of people during the Biden administration. They say 21 million. And a big percentage of those are criminals, serious criminals. I'm not saying just criminal because they came into the border illegally. I'm saying they're criminals at the highest level, murderers. Many of those people murdered more than one person, and they're on the loose. And I was elected to get rid of those criminals, to get them out of our country, or to put them away, but to get them out of our country. And I don't see how judges can take that authority away from a president.
Well, they're trying to do it even as we speak. Even the Supreme Court, that's offered a little bit of help and support to Donald Trump on other issues. But why there are so many elites that just want the border to be wide open? I mean, much has been made of the late Pope Francis. He just wanted wide open borders. He rebuked President Trump. This is why the left loves that Pope. This is why they've come out with all these fawning, recorded segments on Pope Francis's death and just how impactful he was on the Vatican. It's going to be fascinating to watch this play out, just going back to what we discussed on the show yesterday, but just to close the loop here on illegal immigration and the heroes that the radical left holds up. Heroes like Kilmar. Listen to clip 13.
I don't understand why the American left falls in love with the worst people. You've got a gang-banging, human trafficking, wife-beating illegal alien, and a United States senator in a ludicrous display of energy is in El Salvador having Mai Tais and Yahtzee. I do not get it. I do not understand why the left takes on the heroes. I don't get it.
Why do they choose the heroes that they choose? The absolute worst people. If it were any other scenario, they wouldn't defend the indefensible. But in this case, you gotta defend the Maryland man. Listen to Victor Davis Hanson, clip 14.
We're back to Trayvon Martin. He was a great kid. He wasn't scouting out things. He didn't try to beat up some. And that is another left-wing icon. George Floyd was another one. They can't just get a person that is normal, hardworking, lawful. That's too boring for them. They got to have an ex-gangbanger who's been deported, or they have to get a pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic guy who he's their hero, or they have to get Mangione, an assassin, or they have to get...
Yeah, we went through the list just the other day. I think it was last week. Whether it's Mangione or Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, they picked the absolute worst people. You could see the devil's hand in all of this to glorify violence, rape, murder, robbery, criminality. Yeah, they're a victim. The criminals are the victims. Kilmar's the victim. If these people had their way, you could see why God had to intervene to save America temporarily, because we were under intense, bitter affliction, and we're about to be blotted out. I don't think I played this for you the other day. It's from some British lord that's commenting on the rapes that the radical leftists in the media worked so hard. I mean, they've worked hard for decades to cover up the truth about Rotherham and other places in the UK where these young, white, British girls were just being repeatedly raped over the course of months, sometimes years. And the establishment, well, they just turn a blind eye to it. Listen to clip 16.
but accept that if we extrapolate nationally the Jay report on Rotherham and other reports on Telford and Oxford, there appear to have been upwards of 250,000 young white girls raped in this century, very largely by Muslim men. And given these girls are usually raped several times a day for years, so, my lords, what is the government's answer to the Chief Constable of Northumbria, who has just said that there is every likelihood that these grooming gangs are operating in every one of our major cities? So, my lords, what is the government doing to prosecute those in authority who turned a blind eye to all this because they were afraid of being Islamophobic and so on? And what is it doing to compensate and help these victims mentally?
Now, as I watched that, it may be that we showed that the other day, but it's worth repeating here. I mean, what's worse? These gang rapes, or the mentality among the ruling class that, well, we've got to cover it up because they're Muslims and we can't be seen as Islamophobic. So let the white girls continue to get raped. Let the abuse continue. Let the criminal activity continue. And if you try to expose it, well, then we'll go after you. We'll put you in prison for shining light on this tragedy. For shining light on this horrific trend. I mean, it's all over Britain. Certainly in some communities more than others, I suppose. But just really despicable. Despicable. You can't even really describe how horrible it is because it's your own country. It's like you're committing suicide. It's like you want crime-infested streets. It's like you want to see the cities of America destroyed. You want to invite the gangs in from all over the world. And then go and have taxpayers fund your trip to El Salvador so you can visit the gang member in prison and try to get him back to the States. Try to get him back into America. Well, there's a few other things. I think when you look at the radical left, the death of the Democrat Party, you think about how long these people that were attacking the United States, that were fundamentally transforming the United States, how much they prospered in that wickedness. Fauci, as in Tony from the Daily Caller, says here, Fauci's first year of retirement was a money-making bonanza. He's been exposed as a liar and a fraud, and he's making millions. Because you see how it works. This symbiotic relationship between the regime media and then these activists, these political hacks. That's what he is. Self-serving political hack. Lining his pockets. Former White House Chief Medical Advisor Tony Fauci earned $3.5 million in his first year of retirement from government and may have misled Congress about the date of his departure, documents reveal. He may have misled Congress, just like he misled the world on the Wuhan lab. He was still lying about that last year. It says Fauci leveraged his celebrity status as a top trusted messenger on COVID-19 to pad his earnings in 2023. He sold his memoir to a subsidiary of Penguin Random House for a reported $5 million in March of last year, or 2023. The news coincided with a March 2023 congressional memo showing Fauci had privately prompted an influential paper dismissing the theory that COVID could have resulted from a lab accident. He told this prominent journal, now don't print that. It didn't come from the lab. It sure did. Gain of function. And yet here he is as this highly paid, professional scaremonger, highest paid in the government, makes his millions after the fact. What a system, right? Wall Street Journal says the Biden administration unlawfully hid a 2022 report revealing that 7 U.S. service members likely contracted COVID-19 at the World Military Games in Wuhan, China, months before the WHO declared a global pandemic. It says here Americans are right to be concerned. Talks about science, falsely so-called, as Paul said, the gain-of-function research. That was a giant mistake that cost millions of lives, canceled funding and partnerships with China. It says here, none of that happened instead. Instead, the Chinese Communist Party was permitted to bleach the crime scene as Dr. Fauci, along with a cabal of Wuhan Institute collaborators and National Institutes of Health grantees, whitewashed history by insisting for years that the most likely origin of the virus was natural. They lied for years, and now they're making their millions. Millions and millions of dollars. It's perfect, isn't it? It perfectly illustrates everything's wrong with the ruling class, with science, with higher education, with the government swamp. So much of it is being exposed. Finally, it took God to do that. When we come back, we'll follow up on yesterday's breaking news regarding Pope Francis and what's next for the Catholic Church. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We'll be right back.
Daily news, Bible prophecy. See the connection on the Trumpet Daily. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the flood of news and information? You need something to sift the news and bring you only what matters most. You need the Trumpet Daily. You also need something to help you understand not just what's happening now, but what will happen next. You need the Trumpet Daily. Only the Trumpet Daily accurately matches daily news to precise Bible prophecies. Because Bible prophecy is the only tool up to the task of sifting the news down to what's important and showing you what will happen next. Join host Stephen Flurry every weekday. Go to trumpetdaily.com.
With the death of Pope Francis, one of the voices for peace in Gaza has fallen silent as the war continues with full force.
Now, despite Pope Francis' appeals, the region currently seems further away from peace than ever before. What difference can a religious leader like the Pope actually make in a conflict like this that spans decades?
If we go back to Camp David in 2000, I recall a senior Israeli minister at the time who was part of that meeting at Camp David told me that they blew it because they had no understanding of the importance of the religious aspects of this conflict. They knew it was in some way had to be dealt with, but they were hoping by leaving it to the end of the negotiations, issues like Jerusalem could be papered over. And of course, Arafat couldn't sign on what he was presented because of the religious implications of it. So I use that as an example of how extremely important it is to engage religious leaders as well as political leaders. So whatever political settlement is found, there is a theological underpinning. And I think that's been sadly lacking in the past 20-odd years that I've been involved in it.
And so the world waits, and we'll see. I think one of the reports I saw this morning, something like 180 cardinals under the age of 80, and how that Francis, I think he appointed over 100 of them. So he's definitely had his impact on the cardinals, or at least the ones that he's put in that place or that position. But at the same time, like I said yesterday, I mean, we're entering into a new era, and it's just like my father said in the latest Trumpet. You know, the fact that if I can find this, I went into my office yesterday. Probably can't grab it offhand, but here it is. I showed you the Trumpet article This was put at the door of my office. I was out of town over the weekend, so I didn't get in until after the show yesterday. But here's the same article from Friday. A new era requires a new pope. That's our Pastor General's report. That's the report that goes out to our ministers every Friday. And then you have the latest Trumpet magazine. So here, I mean, those of us in God's church, we're getting all these articles. We're being told, okay, there's going to be a new pope coming on the scene. And then yesterday morning, the pope dies. Pope Francis dies. As I said at the top, I mean, there's no let up, which is why we've got to be grounded, spiritually grounded, locked in. The New York Post says here, 2 days ago, Christians the world over celebrated the glory of the resurrected Jesus on Easter. In Rome, Pope Francis, still weakened by his recent hospital stay, toured St. Peter's Square in the Pope Mobile and came to the balcony overlooking the square to bless the thousands of people gathered there. Our hearts were full of joy at the sight of our Holy Father as we continued to pray for his full recovery. And now our hearts tremble at the somber news of his passing. Commentators note that Pope John Paul II revived the soul of the church and the world, reminding us unrelentingly that we, God's children, have his life deep within us, in our soul, and thus in every human life special, every person noble. It's amazing how, I mean, it doesn't matter how bad. Bombs are going to be dropping in the Great Tribulation, and you're going to have people under this delusion of, I think good is winning over evil. I think love is winning out. And Pope Francis is proof. As I said yesterday, all it takes is the death of one pope, and you very quickly realize that this is a very worldly, carnal institution, the Vatican, its government, the way they select a successor, all the human beings involved in that decision. And just look at the coverage. Look at all of the fawning coverage coming from the regime media. Now they're very religious. Suddenly, they're very religious because Pope Francis was woke. That's right, he was woke Pope. And so we love the Catholic Church. Now we want to make sure, if we have any influence, that a conservative doesn't come along, because that would be bad. I mean, as I said at the start, you look at reporting, whether on the local level or the national level or the international level, and there's just shallowness through and through. They were, again, I'm not pretending to be some kind of expert on all the guys that are lining up to replace Francis, except for Pizzaballa. We do know a little bit more about him. But you listen to this pre-recorded segment on who could possibly replace Francis, and then the national morning show today. I was watching this because I was waiting for the interview with the Celtic Throne performers. They go live to some guy out in front of the Vatican and say, well, what about the successor? He basically says everything that was in the pre-recorded package. The same thing. They all repeat the same talking points. And then if that gets old, just make sure you have 2 or 3 on the panel and, have a good chat. Have a little bit of an argument if it's the cable news at night. And this passes for the news. It makes me think of what Herbert Armstrong used to say about the meaning of gospel. Jesus came into Galilee preaching the gospel of the kingdom of God. And gospel means good news. Jesus came in giving tomorrow's news today. And this was good news. This is what our hope is in. This is what we set our minds on every day, the soon coming kingdom of God. And yet no one does that in this present evil world, because we're just lost in the present. Now the Pope died. So here's the package we've had prepared in case, he was 88 and he was sick, so we put this together a couple months ago, and now here you go. The front runners, Pizzaballa, and then who's the other one? Well, the one that was the Secretary of the State. And maybe it'll finally be in Italian. Bible prophecy Certainly does give us a lot of insight into what's coming. We may not know the specific individual, but we know the direction that the Vatican is traveling in. You know, and yes, we've been on this. I mean, going back 3, 4, 5 popes. So who cares? Those that would say, well, you've always talked about how that this next pope could be the one. Well, I mean, Paul was talking about the return of Christ happening in his day. There's nothing wrong with eagerly, excitedly anticipating the culmination of all of these prophesied events as a lead into the spectacular return of Jesus Christ to this earth. You step back and you look at what's been happening since October 7th, since November 5th, since the start of this year, the inauguration of President Trump. Here again, just these last 2 issues of the Trumpet magazine, you know, up in arms. You've got Europe building up the military machine because in their minds, I mean, Trump's already abandoned them. And then this one, will Trump's peace plans fly? And then right within this issue, as I showed you yesterday, a new era demands, it requires a new pope. And here we are. I talked yesterday about the spiritual awakening. Something is shifting. I gave you this yesterday. And we can see it in the data among Generation Z. It says overall, younger generations are more spiritually curious. It says Americans' engagement with the Bible also appears to be increasing. The 2025 State of the Bible report from the American Bible Society found an increase in Bible use and engagement. Bible sales have spiked, driven primarily by first-time buyers. This is at the USA Today. And it says, finally, Christian entertainment has seen a remarkable surge. From The Chosen to The King of Kings, faith-based storytelling is gaining a wider audience. That's right. I read you that article from the Trumpet just yesterday. It may seem unlikely with all the facts and figures, the percentages going down in recent decades of religious attendance and that sort of thing. But as the Trumpet forecasted years ago, you can expect for it to turn around. And then more recently, we had the article in the January issue of the Trumpet. It's prophesied. That's how we know. Listen to this from Fox Business, clip 3.
There is a revival of Catholic traditional teaching, and it's drawing the young people. A lot of people say, no, if you're young, you veer to the left. Well, that apparently is not so among Catholics.
30 to 70% increase in baptisms this Easter in Catholic dioceses all over the country. And this is happening in France.
Now, his
in the
supporters, Pope Francis's supporters, will say, well, that's because of his ideology. In fact, when these people are asked what they believe in, they're very sort of old traditional Catholic doctrine.
They are hardcore John Paul II, Mother Angelica Catholics.
The Wall Street Journal had a piece about it.
Right. Well, they want clear doctrine. They want orthodoxy.
That's from Fox Business. This is, again, from the USA Today. Overall, younger generations are more spiritually curious. Barna Research Group reports that most Gen Z teens are interested in learning more about Jesus, with younger cohorts leading the way in the growth of new commitments. So there you go. You see, you see the resurgence of the great universal church in Europe, but even as those commentators bring out there, even here in the United States. This is from Herbert Armstrong. He's commenting on the significance of the Pope's death back in 1978, and here again, eagerly anticipating the return of Christ, he talked during the 1980s about God holding things back, about a period of delay, and for whatever reason, of course, it all has to do with the work, God's work. I mean, once God's work on earth is finished, I mean, this was Jesus' message. This was his mission. This was what he said he finished at the very end. That was his goal. That's what he kept his sights focused on. Becoming that perfect lamb sacrifice. And we too have to finish this work. And when we do, I mean, that's when it's over for this present evil world. says here, I mean, you could take what was written here in 1978 and apply it perfectly to where we are today. It says here, it had seemed that the resurrection of the Catholic-ruled Europe was considerably past due, but in Revelation 7, when the time had come for the trumpet plagues to be poured out, you will read how God held up events until the sealing of the 144,000. Further on it says, so it has seemed God has deliberately held up the resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire until God's great commission is completed. See, it really, I mean, God's work really and truly is uppermost in his mind. But, I mean, this is 1978. This is almost 50 years ago. And now look at where we are in Europe. It says, when this European combine, politically, militarily, religiously, with a common currency, this is 1978. At the time of this, there was no currency in the works. Europe was divided by an iron curtain, as Churchill said. Germany was literally divided by a stone wall. You had communism in the East. And then all the Western influenced nations on the west side of Europe. Now look at it. How could he know, how could Mr. Armstrong know that there would be a European combine that would combine politically, militarily, and religiously? And we talked yesterday on the show about the importance of this spiritual binding force. The importance of this spiritual force, even in getting behind the emergence of the strong man, the emperor. It's all happening. It says here, now as the world awaits in anxious suspense the election of the new pope or the next pope, it is well that we realize that our days to finish God's work may be fast closing in on us. This time the pope elected may be the one that will signify the imminency of the great tribulation. So as it turns out, he wasn't. That was John Paul. He wasn't. But could this one be the one? There's a new pope in just the next 3 or 4 weeks. And you put it together with the return of Jeroboam, the fact that we're in the Jeroboam end, that it was all prophesied, that God intervened to save America, to save Israel. You put it together with all that we're seeing the world over. I mean, wars, rumors of wars, all these peace plans that just keep blowing up. The fact that the diplomats, the ambassadors for peace, I mean, they're out there saying peace and safety. I had an email that came in. You just take an objective look at this world. It says here, even if I knew nothing of the Bible, I'd still be skeptical when they say peace and safety. I mean, just look at the world. Just look at what's happening in the Middle East, in Ukraine. Look at what, congressional leaders are doing in El Salvador, of all places. Look at the spread of crime or disease. All these things that Jesus wrote about or talked about in the Olivet prophecy. He lists them all out there at the beginning of the chapter and then says this is just the beginning of sorrows. And it all culminates in the great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of time. No, nor ever shall be. That's what we're heading toward. And as I said earlier, I mean, there is good news in the midst of all of these tragedies, all of this nightmare of violence and suffering. It really does just put us that much closer to the prophesied return of Jesus Christ to this earth. That's all we have time for on today's show, the fastest moving hour in broadcasting. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. Thanks for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you tomorrow.